Is this a great game or what? Thank you so much for joining us. And today on the show, Aaron Boone, manager of the New York Yankees, is going to be joining us.
Right. And you're not going to hear Boonie explaining all about Garrett Cole's first start of the year or how great Aaron Judge has been or how they're going to try to get by without Giancarlo Stanton for the next 2 months. We're going to talk to Boonie about all sorts of other things that I did with him when we were teammates for 5 years. The impersonations that he can do, the stuff that he knows that nobody else knows. It's a completely different interview with Aaron Boone because that's what we do on this show.
Yeah, thank you so much to Aaron Boone for joining us. You're going to hear that towards the end of the show.
Right. Jeff, what is different about you? I saw you this morning for the first time in a week. What happened to your face?
So over the weekend, I'm a country music morning show host in the Philadelphia area, and over the weekend it was the Barefoot Country Music Festival, and so every year when I go, I shave my beard off but leave a mustache. So now this is the mustache is still there, but I've got like quite a few days growth on the beard, so I'm probably looking pretty goofy.
You look different. So as far as mustaches go, Jeff, the greatest mustache in Major League history belongs, of course, to Raleigh Fingers.
I was going to say
he's a Hall of Famer, the famous handlebar mustache. But in the College World Series, this incredible College World Series between Tennessee and Texas A&M, Kirby Connell of Tennessee has the second greatest mustache to Raleigh Fingers I've ever seen. It's amazing. And it's a Raleigh Fingers knockoff. It's a handlebar. It's absolutely beautiful. And as far as shaving a beard goes, Jeff, which I had to do and you've done before, years ago, maybe 30 years ago, Rob Murphy was a pitcher for the Red Sox, and he's pitching in Seattle one night. Rob Murphy's a wicked smart guy. So he gets lit up as a reliever in the seventh inning of a game at the Kingdome, and he goes in and shaves his beard and mustache in between innings. So he comes back out in the eighth inning.
No.
He's completely clean shaven because he was so upset how poorly he had pitched in the seventh inning. He comes out and gets a 1-2-3 eighth inning. And I asked him about it. And I asked him about it because I wrote it for Sports Illustrated. Then I saw him in an airport like 20 years later. And I said, Rob, that was my favorite Rob Murphy note of the year. And he gave me, I think it was May 5th, 1991, the exact date of the time that he shaved his beard and mustache in the seventh inning of a game.
Yeah, players are very superstitious, and we should get into that at some point. But speaking of the College World Series, we're going to get to them during the Game Changer of the Week because it has been huge and an incredible series to watch. But I think the most important thing we need to discuss is Willie Mays. Now, if you look back to last week's episode, right, we highlighted the Rickwood Game, and it released at midnight on Tuesday, and the announcement, the sad news that Willie Mays had passed, came out Tuesday afternoon. So we never really had a chance on the show to remember him, so to speak, even though we did talk about him last week, which was so beautiful that we got to talk about him in the guise of the Rickwood Game.
Right. And I explained to everyone on ESPN and stories that I wrote that Willie Mays is the greatest player I've ever seen. And I've told you before, Jeff, when he broke in 1951, no one had ever seen an athlete quite like him. Greatest combination of power, speed, and defense that ever lived. And 73 years later, I believe he is still the greatest combination of power, speed, and defense ever. But what separated Willie for me, Jeff, was just how gracious he was with his time and his information for not just players on his team, but players on other teams. The way he connected with others was unbelievable. So one of his best friends was Bill White, who was the first baseman for the Cardinals at the time. And Bill White, of course, was teammates with Bob Gibson, Hall of Fame pitcher. And Bob Gibson wore glasses off the field, and so they go to Willie Mays' house one night. Willie invites Bill White over for dinner. So Bill White shows up in the offseason at Willie Mays' door, and he's got Bob Gibson with him. So Willie opens the door. He looks at Bill White and goes, "Great to see you, Bill. How are you?" He looks at Bob Gibson, who he'd faced 100 times, and said, "Who's that?" And Bill White said, "Willie, it's Bob Gibson." And Willie looks at him and goes, "You wear glasses? You need glasses, and you don't wear them to pitch? You're going to kill somebody." without wearing glasses when you pitch. That was Willie's reaction to Bob Gibson in street clothes showing up at his house on a cold December night in the offseason. It was so classic Willie Mays.
That's incredible. And there were such beautiful tributes to him at the Rickwood game this past Thursday, including the obvious 24 right behind home plate.
Right. The whole Rickwood experience was sensational.
Amazing.
Major League Baseball did such a good job of dressing up that field, the oldest field in this country, baseball field built in, 1910. And the tributes they gave to the Negro League players was just unbelievable. And the tribute to Willie Mays was breathtaking. It was passionate. It was absolutely beautiful. And I'll never forget just looking. Unfortunately, I didn't get to go. But looking at that field was the giant number 24. Jeff, I think 24 is the most synonymous baseball number in baseball. You look at 24 and you don't even have to ask, what is that? Well, that is Willie Mays' number. And of course, he's the greatest number 24 of all time. So we did this with Lou Gehrig, the greatest number 4s of all time, because we never go into 20 to 4 because it's always Lou Gehrig is number 1. Willie Mays is obviously number 24 of all time. But Miguel Cabrera is our first baseman.
Okay.
Robinson Cano is our second baseman.
Great start.
Dick Grote is the shortstop, MVP of the National League in 1960, and a basketball player at Duke, by the way.
Wow.
Pretty good two-sport guy. Tony Perez, Eduardo Perez's dad, who began his career as a third baseman. He's our third baseman. He wore number 24, of course. Barry Bonds wore 24 as a tribute to Willie Mays when he was with the Pirates. Then when he went to the Giants, he wore his dad's number 25, but he wore 24 for a long time. Rickey Henderson wore a bunch of numbers, but he wore 24. And of course, Ken Griffey Jr. wore 24 his entire career. And, Ken Griffey Jr. and Willie Mays are connected in so many different ways. Manny Ramirez is our DH, and there were several DH candidates, believe me. I couldn't find Rick Dempsey is our catcher, not a Hall of Famer, but trust me, nobody presented a target for a pitcher better than Rick Dempsey. We got catchers catching on one knee right now, and the pitchers can't even see where the target is set up. Nobody did that better than Rick Dempsey. And Early Wynn, Hall of Fame pitcher, won 300 games. He also wore number 24. So all of those guys wore number 24, a whole bunch of Hall of Famers, and a bunch of them wore them as a tribute to Willie Mays.
It's incredible. And best of all, Tim, all number 24. Now let's get into the takeaways on what's happened in Major League Baseball.
Right. Well, Jeff, every week there's like 30 of them. I always have to narrow it down. So Stephen Kwan of the Surprising Guardians was hitting 390 through Sunday. 390. Jeff, I keep telling you, it's harder to get a hit today than in any era in Major League history. And we've lost the value of the hit as we just try to hit the ball out of the ballpark. Not only is he hitting 390, he just finished a stretch of 44 straight plate appearances without striking out, which is unheard of. He had 16 strikeouts this season through 200 at-bats. Giancarlo Stanton, who's a different hitter, I'm not being critical, he had 16 strikeouts in his first 35 at-bats this year. Stephen Kwan, he puts the ball in play, and this is one reason why the Guardians are so good, and the third best team in the league, as far as I'm concerned right now, is they have a guy at the top of the order who goes up there saying, I'm going to hit this ball hard. I'm going to hit a hard ground ball single. I'm going to put it in play. And I just love it when I see somebody who can get a hit and who doesn't strike out all the time. Max Scherzer came back for the Rangers, made his first start of the season on Sunday, and typically 5 scoreless innings, allowed 1 hit. So now that is the 6th start of his in his career in which he's allowed 0 or no hits and no walks in at least 5 innings. The 6th time he's done that. The only pitchers who have done that as many times as Pedro Martinez, who I've told you in a short sample is the greatest pitcher I've ever seen, and Walter Johnson, of course, is the greatest pitcher of all time. And, hey, I ever tell you what high school...
Hey, did you go to Walter Johnson High School?
Yeah, I say that every single day of my life, and I'm wearing my WJ shirt again today. And Scherzer tied Greg Maddux for 11th on the all-time strikeout list on Sunday. So it was a really impressive return for Max Scherzer.
We might be the only podcast sponsored by a public school.
Right. We love it.
What up, WJ?
Yeah. So the Mets won again on Sunday. They are 13-6 in June. They have the best June record after going 9-19 in May, where they were basically the worst team in May, and they've been the best team in June. Francisco Alvarez, their catcher, has come back and made an enormous difference. He's really gotten good behind the plate, but he can really hit. And suddenly the Mets are going to look like they're going to be buyers at the trade deadline instead of unloading all of their players. I think the Mets have now at least an outside chance to make a run at a wild card, and I didn't think there was anything close to that. The only problem was Edwin Diaz, their closer last night, got ejected from the game before he even pitched in the game. They checked his glove, they checked his hand, and they found an illegal substance, and they threw him out of the game before he even pitched. Now, I will tell you, a couple years ago, I had somebody tell me who would know that the one guy that's most affected by not being allowed to use the sticky stuff is going to be Edwin Diaz.
Really?
So last year, he didn't pitch because of an injury. So this is the first year that A, he's pitching with a pitch clock, and B, he's not allowed to use a sticky substance, and he hasn't pitched very well. So I think there's a connection there. Braves in the Mets division, the Braves pitching has been really good, Jeff. You know, it's so interesting. The Braves have this historically good offensive team, and they haven't been very good, but their pitching has carried them. Reynaldo Lopez is their new ace right now, even though Chris Sale is there and Charlie Morton and Max Fried. They got great starting pitching. But Lopez's ERA for his career, and he's had a pretty long career, is over 4. It's 4.05. And this year it's 1.57.
Wow.
Jeff, this is what is so beautiful about baseball is the light goes on for these guys, and sometimes they don't even know why it went on. And then the light goes off, and they don't know why it went out. While the light is on for Reynaldo Lopez, he has been really, really good. And of course, Pablo Lopez pitches for the Twins. And Pablo Lopez had a great year last year, but he's struggled this year. His ERA is over 5. But on Sunday, he allowed no runs and had 14 strikeouts. Whew. He's one of only 3 players in the history of the Twins and Senators. Of course, the Twins came from the Washington Senators to have multiple games with no runs allowed and 14 strikeouts. Johan Santana, borderline Hall of Famer, and Walter Johnson did it multiple.
Another mention.
Did I ever tell you that I went to Walter Johnson High School? Did I ever tell you that I worked for the pitch?
God made sure that you were a baseball writer.
Right. And the last thing is, I got a text from a guy in baseball the other day, a guy who would know, a guy who's a really clear-thinking guy. And he said to me, the best pitcher in baseball pitches for the Pirates. And he was talking about Paul Skeens.
Really?
Who's made 8 major league starts. He's got a 2.14 ERA. He throws 100 on almost every fastball he throws. And it's a little early for this, Jeff, but I think Paul Skeens should start the All-Star game for the National League.
Wow.
Now, Ranger Suarez, your boy, has had a better year than Paul Skeens. But when you're trying to promote the game, this is the way to do it. You take the one pitcher that everyone wants to see, and you start him in the All-Star game, and you tell people, this is the future of our game. And speaking of 22-year-olds, we just finished the College World Series, right. Texas A&M and Tennessee, and it was tremendous to watch. Sunday, I watched the Game 2 with Ben McDonald, who's, of course, a former great college pitcher, a really good major league pitcher, and sitting next to him watching a college baseball game, as well as all the big league games, was really important for me to understand where we are in college baseball. Yesterday, Chris Cortez, Sunday, for Texas A&M, threw well over 20 pitches at 100 miles an hour.
Wow.
And he's a college player. Jeff Kent, I voted for him for the Hall of Fame every year. His son, Caden Kent, played for Texas A&M, and he can really hit. There were so many good hitters all over that field. I mean, the power that Tennessee had, just the skill and everything that Texas A&M had, it's just another reminder how good college baseball is these days. And that pipeline to the big leagues is getting more streamlined. The Paul Skeens of the world get there sooner rather than later, and they should, because college baseball is preparing them in a very good way.
That's our game changer of the week, was that great series for the College World Series. But let's hop into our Kurkjians, because I know our listeners love your Kurkjians.
All right, so Jeff, who's in the Kurkjians every week? Let's see how well you listen to me every week. Who has been in a Kurkjian? Like
Ellie De La Cruz.
Yes, so Ellie.
Nailed it. Woo!
Way to go, Jeff. That just means you're listening to me for the first time in your life, okay? So I told you last week, look, Ellie De La Cruz plays for me any day. He's the most exciting player in the game. He's remarkable. We've never seen anybody quite like him. But I told you last week he was going to be the first one to get to 100 strikeouts, which, of course, he was. So he's already struck out 100 times, and we're on June the 24th here. Right. It's just unbelievable. But he also leads the league in errors. So he leads the league in strikeouts and in errors, and only 3 players in Major League history have ever led the league at the end of the year in errors and strikeouts. Mark Reynolds in 2008, Mark Reynolds once told me, I hold a lot of weird records in baseball, and he's right about that. Roy Smalley Sr. did it in 1950, and a guy named Jim Levy, never heard of him, in 1931. So that's what Ellie De La Cruz, he's going to have black marks all the way through his baseball reference page, because he's going to lead the league in all sorts of good and bad categories. That's who Ellie, you can't take your eyes off him, because he might do something that you've never seen before.
He is so incredible. He makes Dad and I look like little Lego guys, with how long his legs are.
He's 6'5", Jeff.
Have you seen him stride across the field?
Jeff.
He takes 2 steps. He could dunk the ball from the 3-point line. You know what I mean? He just has the longest stride ever.
And he's the fastest guy in the league, and he hits the ball almost as far as anyone in the league. That
crazy.
Combination is crazy. So, speaking of crazy, the Dodgers were down by 5 runs in the 9th inning to the Rockies the other day and came back to win. They were down like 8-3, and they won 11-8. And in the 9th inning, they hit a grand slam and a 3-run homer, down by 5 runs. So it's the only time we checked since 1961 that any team went to the 9th inning of a game down by 5 runs, had a grand slam and a 3-run homer in the 9th inning to come back and win the game when each home run was necessary to win the game. In other words, it wasn't 2-1 and then a guy hit a grand slam to make it, 5-2, and then they made it 8-2. They needed both the grand slam and the 3-run homer to win the game. First time since 1961 that has ever happened. And this is why every time you look at the box score, you go, wow, I'm not sure I've seen this. And in this case, nobody has seen it, certainly back to at least 1961. The Padres hit a walk-off homer in 3 games in a row, okay? So I'm thinking I should know the answer to this, but when's the last time that happened? Well, believe it or not, it's happened a bunch of times, and the last team to do it was the Dodgers in 2019. It was only 5 years ago that a team won 3 consecutive games with a walk-off homer. So many years ago, the Red Sox won back-to-back games with a walk-off homer. So I called the Elias Sports Bureau. This is one of my favorite notes ever. And I said, when's the last time the Red Sox won back-to-back games with a walk-off homer? So here's the answer. In 1935, Wes Ferrell, a pitcher, hit walk-off homers in back-to-back games.
No.
Yes. Wes Ferrell started the first game, pitched 9 innings, and led off and hit a home run in the bottom of the 9th inning to win a game that he started. And then the next night, he came up as a pinch hitter and hit another walk-off homer. So the last time the Red Sox had done it, it had been like 60 years since the Red Sox had done it in back-to-back games, and it was done by a pitcher. Again, only in baseball can this crazy stuff happen. All right, now, Jeff, what's the name of my 3rd book? What's it called?
I'm fascinated by sacrifice flies.
And sometimes do I take that a little too far? Do I take it a little
way too seriously?
Am I too fascinated by it? You're allowed to say that.
Well, I mean, when your voice starts to crack when you get that excited, I think you're a little overboard.
Well, this will qualify as going way overboard. The last 2 things are stretches of all time. Okay, this is a bigger stretch than Willie McCovey. So Brenton Doyle of the Rockies the other day had 2 sacrifice flies and 2 grounded in double plays in the same game. All right. Now, none of that is important, but when I look in the box score and I see 2 GIDPs and 2 sacrifice flies, and the second one was a sacrifice fly to win the game. It was a walk-off sacrifice fly. I called the Elias and said, how many times has this happened? 2 GIDPs and 2 sac flies in the same game. Aaron Hicks in 2017, Hall of Famer Ted Simmons in 1983. That's it.
That's it.
And now Brenton Doyle. So, again, when pointless information is necessary, just come to me.
Now I'm worried after that final Kurkjian, what kind of things you're going to have for On This Date in Baseball. What you got?
Well, these are more serious, but Bobby Bonds on this date in 1968 became the first player since 1900 to hit a grand slam in his first major league game. Wow. Bobby Bonds, of course, is Barry Bonds' father. And I worshiped the Giants in 1968 from 3,000 miles away. It was unhealthy, Jeff. But Bobby Bonds was going to be the next Willie Mays, which he didn't live up to because no one could live up. Bobby Bonds was a great player, but he hit a grand slam in his first major league game. And this is less important, Jeff, but in 1971 on this date, actor Kurt Russell played for Bend in the Northwest League. So when you watch him, play a football player in the movies, you watch him move around in movies, it's because he was a professional baseball player. He played 2 years in the minor leagues. He got hurt, and that was the end of it. But on this date in 71, he had a single, a double, and 2 stolen bases for Bend.
Kurt Russell.
Yeah. And I maintain, Jeff, and I need your input on this, the greatest speech of all time in any movie, at least inspirational speech, is Kurt Russell in the movie Miracle.
Oh, it's by far the best coach speech in any movie.
Ever, right.
It's amazing. With the music?
I never played hockey in my life, and the 80, Olympic team was unbelievable, but I tear up every time he said, "You were born to be hockey players, every one of you, and you were meant to be here tonight." I love the way Kurt Russell says tonight. He says it, tonight we are the greatest hockey team in the world. And Jeff, the last on this date is in 1972, Carlos Delgado was born. Carlos Delgado hit 473 major league home runs. Okay. Started with the Blue Jays as a catcher, then they moved him to first base, and then he went to the Mets. He's a borderline Hall of Famer, but knowing how pathetic your poor dad is, what a weird mind he has when it comes to baseball. Carlos Delgado, 473 homers. What significance does that have? And you have to remember, with the curious mind, the stupid mind that I have about baseball, you need to take a guess. I'll give you a clue. Delgado.
Oh, I was going to say most home runs for the initial CD, but I was thinking, CD-ROM. But
no, you got it. The most home runs for anyone whose last name begins with D.
Oh, really?
You did it.
I was close.
You did it.
All right.
I'm very proud of you, Jeff.
Thank you.
Of course, I know.
It's a big moment for me, folks.
A through Z, which is pathetic in itself, but that's Carlos Delgado's claim to fame. Besides having a 4-homer game and being a borderline Hall of Famer, he hit more home runs than anyone whose last name starts with a D. And I challenge anyone out there to just sit down one day when you have nothing else to do with your life and try to name the all-time home run hitters for each letter of the alphabet. A, of course, Hank Aaron, B, Barry Bonds, so on and so forth. Carlos Delgado, you did it, Jeff. You're starting to be like me. And don't do that, okay?
Well, I'm starting to be like you because I have a surprise for you. You brought up Kurt Russell, and I've been holding on to this for weeks. Now, if you remember, a couple weeks ago, I had the opportunity to interview Kevin Costner in person to talk about his new movie, Horizon, right? It's a new movie that's coming out actually this weekend. And Field of Dreams is our all-time favorite movie. I told him to his face, it's our all-time favorite movie. And he basically said, "That's amazing. Did you take your dad to go see this movie yet?" I said, "Oh, okay, I will." So the point is, I had come up with my own version of a lineup.
You did a team, Tim?
I did. I did a best of all Tim, but in this case, it has no basis in statistical fact at all. This is my best of all Tim fictional baseball players that I've come up with, a list here a whole lineup. Are you ready?
Jeff, you have a child at home. She's not even one yet. I have time to do this stuff. All right, I want to hear it now.
You carry the majority of the research for this show. This is the least I can
carry
do.
all of the research for the show, not the majority. Sorry.
All right. No, you're good. The catcher.
Oh, wait. I'm going to guess this.
Yeah.
It's got to be Crash Davis. Got to be Kevin Costner.
Yep.
What so impressive. He swung the bat from both sides of the plate, and he looks like a ball player. And because he played baseball in college, but being the baseball snob that I am, I'm only a snob in one way. If you're going to make a guy be the star of a baseball movie, he's got to be able to swing a bat and throw a baseball. Otherwise, I'm out.
Bull Durham, Field of Dreams, Chasing Dreams,
Right.
For the Love of the Game.
Crash Davis.
He's been in so many great movies. Now, Let me go over my rules real fast. Can't repeat a movie.
Right.
Can't repeat an actor.
Those are the rules.
So you won't see Kevin Costner again in this because I'm
Those
not
are my
repeating
rules,
actors
right.
or movies. And my final rule was this cannot be about an actual player, right? Like we can't pick Jackie Robinson from 42
Right.
because it's about an actual player,
Right.
okay? Next up, in not the greatest baseball movie of all time, but a .340 lifetime hitter, Stan Ross, played by Bernie Mac and Mr. 3000.
All right, look, our show is a fun-loving show without hot takes and without any anger. So I am going to pass on this because Mr. 3000 is the worst baseball movie I've ever seen.
Second base is Marla Hooch from A League of Their Own.
Yes, she could go. She could play,
She
right?
can move. She's got a great swing,
Right.
but they didn't want to take her on the team because she looked too much like a guy in the
Oh,
movie.
boy. All right.
But she was a heck of an athlete,
Right.
Third base is Ray Mitchell from Angels in the Outfield, played by Stoney Jackson.
Right.
The shortstop is Tanner Boyle.
Oh, yeah.
From Bad News Bears.
Right, the little blonde-haired kid who cussed every 5 seconds.
Every 5 seconds, yeah.
That was a
Left
joke,
field,
too.
Scott Smalls from arguably one of the best baseball movies of all time, The
You're
Sandlot.
killing me, Smalls, right.
Center field is Bobby Rayburn, played by Wesley Snipes in The Fan. He played alongside Robert De Niro in that movie.
And John Kruk was in that movie. And John Kruk told me that he ends up getting killed by Robert De Niro in the movie. He gets stabbed in the neck by Robert De Niro in that movie. So I said, Krukie, what was it like working with De Niro? He said, it was unbelievable. He's the happiest guy in the world. He's talking to everyone. And then as soon as he gets into character, and it took like 2 seconds, he said, I looked in his eyes and it was like Cape Fear all over again. And then he stabbed me in the neck and killed me. So John Kruk, our pal, was in The Fan and he was killed by Robert De Niro.
It's incredible. Right field, rounding out my lineup, would be Roy Hobbs of The Natural.
Right, of course.
And, I mean, it's like Robert Redford, incredible in that movie.
Right. Greatest hitter I ever saw.
We move, designated hitter would be Jack Elliott, played by Tom Selleck in Mr. Baseball.
He could hit a baseball, right.
I've got 4 pitchers here. Henry Rowengartner from Rookie of the Year.
Right.
Wild Thing from Major League,
Right.
Charlie Sheen, of course.
Right, of course, Ricky Vaughn, and our dear friend Rick Vaughn, former PR director of a bunch of teams, really good college pitcher. That movie came out while we were all traveling together with the Orioles, and the star pitcher was Ricky Vaughn, and our PR guy was Rick Vaughn, who threw just as hard. And Charlie Sheen had thrown a baseball before. It was very impressive how hard he threw.
And then Steve Nebraska from The Scout, played by Brendan Fraser.
Right.
Pitched a perfect game
Right.
in the World Series for the Yankees.
Right.
Rigoberto Sanchez, Trouble with the Curve. And our manager, of course, is Billy Haywood from Little Big League,
Right.
who's played by Luke Edwards. Thank you for letting me do my
Jeff,
festival, Tim.
Team Tim, presented by Team Jeff. Way to go.
And if there's any fictional players I missed, I'm sure there are. GreatGameOrWhat.com. You can chime in there. Now on to our Kurkjian Quandary. This is where we debate something like last week. We did the U.S. Open, 18 handicap on a Sunday pins.
200.
Yeah. And I would agree wholeheartedly. I'm hitting 200 at the U.S. Open. No doubt about it. So for this week, Dad, Game 7 of the Stanley Cup Final just happened, and you and I, we're not hockey guys. So I thought it was only fitting for our Kurkjian Quandary. Dad, I want you to take these headphones, okay? Throw these on. We're going to have a guest join the show right now. This is my best friend. We're going to call him. So this is my buddy Alex Parker, okay? He is a high school social studies teacher. We're FaceTiming him right now as we speak. He's a high school social studies teacher, but most importantly, he is a former college hockey player. He actually played hockey overseas, and here he is. What's up, dude?
Morning. How are we?
We need a hockey expert to answer this question. So, Jeff, ask Parker the question.
So, first question for you. A above average beer league player, a forward, right, has 10 penalty shots on an NHL goalie. We're talking the best in the business here. How many of them is he actually making?
You ready for this answer, Jeff?
Yes, please.
0. Goose egg.
Goose egg,
Not
0.
happening.
Parker,
Maybe 1.
And what makes him so great as a goalie, and why couldn't a beer league guy score even 1 out of 10 on him?
His size, athleticism, his hand-eye reaction is that of a major leaguer, I would also argue. And when you combine all of that against a guy that just can't skate or shoot at that same rigor, just not going in.
0 for 10. So, Parker, you were a good college hockey goalie, and you're like 6'10". What are you, 6'5"?
6'5",
you covered the entire goal. So here's the second part of this question, Parker. Now, don't be humble. Tell the truth. We're putting you in the goal today against the 10 best shooters in the NHL, and they're taking 10 penalty shots against you. How many are you going to stop as a good college hockey goalie?
In a game situation, I stop 1, and then maybe a second misses the net or hits a post.
Alex Parker, everybody, head coach of the Landon Boys Hockey Club at Landon High School, and I love what you're doing. Go Bears. Huge fan.
Go Bears always.
Go Bears. Big fan. Parker, thank you so much for joining us. Always love you. Thank you, brother.
Always big fan of the show. Keep up the good work, gentlemen.
All right. See you, Parker.
See ya. Time for It's in the Cards, and we start off with Matt Olson of the Braves.
Okay, Matt Olson's a really good player. I maintain someday he will be the greatest Matt who ever played in the major leagues.
Really?
It's either Matt Holliday or Matt Williams. Matt Chapman was in that discussion. I think someday Matt Olson will be the greatest Matt ever.
All right, we move on right now to Pedro Martinez, who second mention on the show today.
Right. Pedro is the greatest pitcher I've ever seen for a short period of time. When I say short, at least 5 years. In 1999-2000, his ERA was 1.90. The league ERA those 2 years was 4.90. 3 runs higher than his. And the greatest part about Pedro is he told me once that when he was in rookie ball, he weighed 138 pounds. Even I weigh more than that. And he threw 93 miles an hour at 138 pounds. And I said, Pedro, how could you do that? And he goes, well, God gave me that. And that's exactly where his tremendous talent came from.
Melvin Mora of the Baltimore Orioles, a little bit of a throwback here.
Love Melvin Mora, and I love the throwbacks. Melvin Mora's wife, and Jeff, you just had a baby, 10 months ago?
Yeah.
Melvin Mora's wife, while he was playing for the Orioles, had 5 children at the same time. What is that called? A
Quintuplet?
5 children at and they're all grown up and they're all good now. So I saw Melvin like 2 days after his wife had 5 babies. I said, Melvin, what? And he goes, we had a basketball team.
That's amazing. All right, another Baltimore Orioles. Well, at least in this card, he's on the
another
Orioles.
Throwback. Mike Messina is a Hall of Fame baseball pitcher, one of the greatest pitchers I've ever seen, one of the smartest players I've ever met in my life. Graduated from Stanford with a double major from Stanford in 3.5 years. And he knew he was smarter than everyone else, and everyone else knew he was smarter than everyone else. And every once in a while, he loved to be a smart aleck. So one day, he walked through the Yankees clubhouse while he's playing for the Yankees, and 2 guys are playing a board game in the clubhouse, and he goes up to them while they're playing the board game, and he goes, perfect for you guys, ages 6 and up.
Next up, we've got Taylor Rogers of the Giants.
All right, so Taylor and Tyler Rogers, I love this, are pitchers for the Giants, and of course, they're identical twins. So when I was doing a Giants game a couple of years ago, I did a little research on the Rogers. So I looked at their birthplace, and one is born in Denver, and the other is born in Colorado Springs, and yet they're identical twins. So I had to say, I think it was to Taylor, I said, How could you explain that? You and your twin brother don't have the same birthplace. And he goes, well, I think it was just a technicality. We lived in Denver, but we were born in Colorado Springs, so they put us in two different. That's one of those things where you just say, wait a second, you got to be born in the same place if you're identical twins.
And last but not least of the Diamondbacks, Merrill Kelly.
Yeah, Merrill Kelly is a really good major league pitcher on the injured list right now. One reason the Diamondbacks have struggled because their starting pitching's banged up. And this just may be me. I think he looks like Chris Elliott, the actor. There's something about Mary and Groundhog Day.
Oh, my gosh. Yeah, I see
Chris
it.
Elliott. Do you see it?
Yeah.
Every time I watch him pitch, I think I'm watching Chris Elliott pitch. So, all right, in the lids. Here we go.
All right, league in lids. We've put every single team in our lids cap, and here we go. Today, let's hear about the Baltimore Orioles.
All right, the Orioles are really good. The Yankees and Orioles are the two best teams, I believe, in the American League, and I think very early date, one of them is going to the World Series from the American League. Of course, anything could change. The Orioles just hit a home run in their 22nd consecutive game. That was on Sunday. That's a club record. And I just love watching them play, a lot of good young players. But one of my favorite questions to ask people, and all our Oriole fans need to chime in on this, is who's the greatest Oriole of all time? I think it's the hardest discussion ever. Of course, you've got Cal Ripken, who played his entire career there and is the Hall of Fame shortstop, one of the three greatest shortstops ever. You have Brooks Robinson, who played his entire career there and is one of the five greatest third basemen ever and the greatest defensive third baseman in the history of the game. You have Eddie Murray, first ballot Hall of Fame first baseman, who was a better hitter than Cal Ripken or Brooks Robinson. Then you have Frank Robinson, who was a better player than anyone who ever played for the Orioles, but he only played there for close to 6 years. So does he qualify?
Right.
And then you have Jim Palmer, who, the Orioles were great, Jeff, from 1966 through 1983. And that was essentially Jim Palmer's entire career. He won a World Series game in 3 different decades. He won 3 Cy Young Awards. He's one of the greatest pitchers of all time. So let's throw it out there to our Oriole fans.
Right.
Rank them in order. Good luck with this. I'm not sure what I would do.
You mentioned a little bit earlier that you imagine either the Yankees or the Orioles will be in the World Series in the American League. Anything can change, of course, but they're the two best teams in the American League right now, and we're lucky enough to have a guest. Aaron Boone is joining us.
He can do the greatest impersonation of all sorts of people, like Dan Baker of the Phillies. We'll get into this. He can do an offensive lineman, like setting up and then setting up for pass protection. It's one of the funniest things I've ever seen in my life. He is one of the funniest people I've ever seen in my life, and only older people are going to understand this, Jeff. Boonie is kind of tall and lanky, and he reminds me so much of Dick Van Dyke.
Oh, yeah.
In the Dick Van Dyke Show, the way his body moves. Dick Van Dyke is one of the greatest comedians ever, and the way Dick Van Dyke, Rob Petrie's body moved in that reminds me so much of Boonie. But what makes Boonie so special, Jeff, is just how human that he is. He's like the most human former player I've ever met. He loves fantasy football. He loves the Eagles. And what was the first thing he ever said to you the first time that he met you? Do you remember?
Oh, I'm
You spoke to him, and what did he say after you and I are talking right to him?
You sound just like your dad.
He said, that apple didn't fall far from the tree. When he played in Cleveland, he was hitting and he was a good player. Don't get me wrong, made an all-star team, everything else. But one year, it's like June the 4th, and he's hitting 150. It's June the 4th. So he tells me he goes down to the batting cage at 1:30 in the afternoon for a 7 o'clock game to try to get his act together. And he's walking to the batting cage, and the hitting coach for the Indians, who Boonie loved, was Eddie Murray. And Eddie Murray sees Boonie walking at him at 1:30 in the afternoon with a 150 average and just shakes his head like, oh my God, here he comes again. And Boonie looks at Eddie Murray and says, do you think I want to be down here at 1:30 in the afternoon? I don't have a choice. I got to get out of this. And of course, he did get out of it because Boonie, of course, hit one of the biggest home runs in Major League history. 2003 ALCS, hit a walk-off homer off of Tim Wakefield to take the Yankees to the World Series against the Marlins. So I asked Boonie about that many times, and he said, as soon as he hit it, he said, I knew it was gone. And I said to myself, savor every moment of this trip around the bases. Wow. And he said, running to first, I was as clear as day. And as soon as I hit first, I don't remember anything that happened after that. That's how powerful that moment was, that he can't even remember touching second, third, or the plate because he was in such a zone, such a trance, having hit one of the biggest homers ever. And again, Boonie is like the most free, he's the most fun-loving guy. He's always laughing. He's never in a bad mood. And I swear to you, Jeff, in the 6 years that I did games with him, I don't think I ever heard him say a cuss word one time.
Wow.
So then he becomes the Yankee manager, and he gets thrown out of a bunch of games. And I asked him about it, and he goes, yeah, I'm cussing again. Like, this is what Major League managing will do. So he's been thrown out of a game 4 times this year. He's been thrown out of a game 37 times since he took over as the Yankee manager in 2018. That's 8 more times than any other manager has been thrown out. So this implies that Boonie is mean, he's unfair, he's irrational. None of that is true. He's just a wildly competitive guy. And the story that we should have asked him here was his first Major League game. He got ejected from his first Major League game. If I remember it correctly, he was a pinch runner, and he tried to score like a single to the outfield, got thrown out at the plate. He was so upset because it's his Major League debut. He took his helmet and threw it to the ground, which is an automatic ejection. Right. If you throw the equipment, they chucked him out of the game. I can't remember who the umpire was. It's not important. The next day, the umpire comes up to him, and Boonie apologizes. Sorry, it was my first game. I didn't know what I was doing. And the umpire said, look, we all know who you are. You're a good dude. Don't worry about it. And that's Aaron Boone. Wow. Aaron Boone is a good dude, and we're going to hear from him next. We are welcoming in our dear friend Aaron Boone, who is the manager of the Yankees. We're going to pretend like he's not the manager today. We're going to go back to the days where I worked with him at ESPN. And Boonie, we've got Jeff Kurkjian with me. How about that?
It's incredible. It's so good to be on with you guys. So good to see you guys together. And looking forward to chopping up a little baseball today.
One of the coolest things for me was when I got my first job in radio, Cleveland, Ohio, right out of college. You know who's one of the first people to text me? It's Aaron Boone. Wow. And talked so fondly of the city of Cleveland, of course, and so I just got to thank you over our interview for that. We went on your brother's podcast, and he talked about your mind as a kid was so different than Brett Boone's, right? You were all about the stats and the numbers and how the batting stances. How did that come so naturally to you? He was talking about how amazing that was.
Yeah, I don't know, but I was that kid. Going to Veterans Stadium when I was 3 years old, and the other kids would be in the kids' room and doing kid things, and I would be sitting on the stoop next to the in the aisle in the seats behind home plate, just watching games and watching players. And at a very young age, I would mess around with these batting stances. And I think when you're 3 and 4 and 5 years old, big league players got a kick out of this little kid doing stupid stances, like imitating them. And back then when we would have the father-son, the father-kid game every year, Harry Callis would actually get on the mic or on the PA on the loudspeaker and make me come up and do some stances in the midst of the father-child game.
I love it, Jeff. I've seen a million of his stances. They are absolutely perfect. Your favorites, Boonie. I mean, your Larry Boa is ridiculously good. Your Bake McBride. Among a couple of your favorites that you were doing as a little kid, what are they?
So when I was a little kid, I remember they'd always have me do Dave Cash.
Right.
My Larry Bow is like my favorite, but most people are like, yeah, it's kind of a basic stance. It's not that cool. Or, Dave Winfield. I love when I see Buster Olney. I just walk up to him like himself, and he gets a little cross between, I think, annoyed and cracking up. So I enjoy doing that. Joe Torre gave me permission now that I had him in spring training, and I had Joe make a pitching change in spring training, which was so fun and so cool. And he said, all right, now you can imitate me one time when you go take a pitcher out. So at some point, maybe I'll do that.
Yeah, I had Boonie on the Seamhead show when I used to host that at ESPN, and he says, I'm working on my Joe Torre, and I think we're going to see Joe Torre 1971 hitting 363. Instead, he does the most perfect walk of Joe to the mound to take out a pitcher, and then he did it for Joe Girardi. I've never seen Joe Girardi laugh that loud in my life when you did it for him on the field in spring training. Yeah,
it's fun. It's one of those, party favors that works in some settings. And, even now, like I'll kind of breeze through the room a little bit with the team, and every now and then you got a down minute and they'll ask you to do someone. So I still mess around with it a little bit. I was doing Larry Bowen in the Trop yesterday, Boa and Winfield.
That's so great. Boonie, the other thing, Jeff, we played a game called From Ozzie to Oral, 1 through 55, the greatest players, and I've never seen a baseball player who knows uniform numbers better than Boonie. Like, that's what I'm supposed to know because I didn't play in the big leagues. Boonie, where does that come from? How could you have such recall on players' numbers when other players don't? Yeah,
I don't know. I'm not as good as you at it, of course, but I don't know. That's just that's all I watch baseball all the time, and I pick up stupid things, kind of like you do. Like I pick up quirks about people, or I can visualize settings, and I like to think I don't miss much from just the slightest of mannerism in a certain situation.
Well, one skill that you developed and have sent, before you were managing the Yankees and when you were working with my dad, you would send him pictures of cards, and you would be able to say what the background of the card, what stadium they were playing in. So I don't know if you know this, but Tim Kurkjian has his very own baseball card.
Really?
Yeah, and I'm going to come, so for those who watch on YouTube, right, you'll be able to see the card, but Boonie, I'm going to bring the card up close to the camera, as close as I can, to see, because it's just a candid photo of him. We have no idea who took this photo.
Right. There's no home or road uniform here, so that's not going to be a giveaway.
It's a little grainy to me, so I would say Cleveland, but I'm not sure.
It's probably right, Jeff.
It probably is right.
When we worked together, he would routinely send me a picture, and I would routinely get it wrong. And then I would send...
Your dad is sneaky bad at the game. I started dragging him into this, thinking he's going to be great at it.
Right.
And I've sent him what I think are some layups, and he's like, make a guess, and I get like mad at him. Like, you can't even come to that conclusion at all. So, this game still exists for me now. Like, so, we're down here in Tampa in the visiting clubhouse. They have some of these blown up kind of old baseball cards of some guys from the 80s and stuff with that kind of background thing. So I'll drag someone in. I'm like, where's that taken? And people just don't know. But I do.
He does. Now, Boonie, there's always a tell. Is that just your observant nature that you can see, look, that has to be Comiskey Park?
Yeah, I guess so. And I mean, I'm not 100% on this, but I mostly know. And yeah, there's just something about lighting, background, and usually it's immediate. It's just like, boom, oh.
It's instinctual. Like you can't even help yourself.
One of my not, real impactful qualities, I guess. stupid talents.
Right. Jeff, I would send him a picture and I would say, in which stadium? And he would write back like 10 seconds later, Candlestick Park, don't waste my time. It was like so easy for him. And it looks like a sonogram to me. I can't tell, but he never misses anything like that. So Boonie, you also do. Jeff had, this is 5 years ago. I get something. Jeff, show Boonie this showed up on my email about 5 years ago when Boonie and I, 6 years ago, were still working together. And because Boonie can do every announcer, he can do every public address guy. So, Jeff, I want you to play this for him, and I want him to explain what this is all about.
For the Phillies, third baseman Mike Schmidt, catcher Paul Boone, right fielder Bake McBride.
Boonie, what are you doing? You're sending this to me in the middle of the night. It's a cartoon emoji, and it's you doing a perfect impersonation.
So that's Dan Baker, of course, the great PA announcer for the Phillies. And so one of the things, Brad Osmus now is my bench coach, and he sees these quirks of mine every single day like it's a tick. Like I say full of the Phillies in Dan Baker's voice 100 times a day. So my coaching staff, all the people just like, geez, roll the dice. That's 30. So I'm doing this stupid stuff all the day, or we got Mike Harkey on our staff, so I'll be heart for 3. Or Robert, so like, yeah. I mean, yeah. So, and I've turned it into, Brad Osmus. So his name backwards is Sumswa. So I've turned it into, when I see him, I say Sumswa for 30.
Oh my God.
That is priceless.
It's my trying to stay sane in an insane way.
Right. Well, you're doing a good job. So we went to Williamsport several times, Boonie and I together. Some of the best days of my life were at the Little League World Series with Boonie. So one night we go out to Franco's, and when we're done and it's late, we're out in the middle of the street of Williamsport, and no one had seen Boonie do the offensive lineman in the National Football League. And he gets down in the stands, and I'm telling you, Kyle Peterson pissed in his pants. He was laughing so loud. Boonie, you're a baseball player. Where does the offensive lineman come from?
I don't know. Just again, I love football. I love basketball. So I've watched a lot over the years. So I like to get in the center's position and point out the
reads,
the blocking and assignments and the reads. Then I like to get into my left tackle mode. So yeah, we do that a lot too.
All right. And again, this is not going to translate if you can't see it, but Boonie, you have to do Moses Malone at the free throw line, including what he does to touch his beard. Just give it to us for 10 seconds what Moses Malone looked like at the free throw line.
So can you get me here a little?
Yeah, we got you.
We got you.
Dad's crying.
Look,
Moses, man.
Moses was something else, and only I would appreciate something like that because that was absolutely perfect. And give us the Dave Zinkoff, give us at least a couple guys, please, from the starting lineup for the Sixers.
Got it. West Texas Stadium at 10, Mo Sheep. The other guy. Down West Louisiana, 22, Andrew Stoney. Shut up. Pittsburgh, Virginia, Pittsburgh High School, Moses Malone. Forward. West Virginia, Mark Ivorone. Good boy. Captain, University of Massachusetts, Six Doctor. Do you? Coach Billy Cunningham, Sis Mac Lucas.
Oh, stop it, Boonie. This is too funny. This is so
Oh my
great.
gosh.
All right, so we took a road trip. We took many road trips together, and I had challenged Boonie to the ice bucket challenge because Sut had challenged me. We were broadcast partners, so I threw a giant bucket of water over my head. Now I challenged Boonie, and you remember the rules, Jeff. In an ice bucket challenge, you had to do it within 24 hours. So Boonie, tell us the rest of that story when I challenged you that day in Boston.
Yeah, so we're in Boston, and did we walk in? Was it a restaurant or we're in the hotel lobby?
Hotel lobby.
Yeah, the hotel lobby. So we asked somebody if they would be willing to dump a bucket of ice water on me, and as you might imagine, in Boston, a lot of people were up for that challenge. We're up for that. And it just so happened that this guy, of course, was a Red Sox fan and not a big fan of mine. So was very happy to oblige and dump a bucket of ice water on me. We did it on the sidewalk, didn't we?
Yes. So the kicker to the whole thing is Boonie says, would you be willing to throw ice bucket all over me? And he looks at Boonie, he goes, of course, you're Aaron Boone. I hate your guts. And then he doused him. That's what we got when we took road trips together. It was so good. So, Boonie, we're going to pivot for just a second here. You grew up in a family where your grandfather was a major leaguer, and, of course, your father was a major leaguer. As a little kid, what was it like sitting with Ray Boone as he told you about baseball, say, in the 40s?
It was amazing. So my grandpa, he grew up in San Diego. And, another pretty good ball player grew up in San Diego named Ted Williams. So Ted was older than my grandfather, but my gramps and their buddies Ted Williams was a god. Before he even went to the Red Sox and became a great major league player, he was just this mythical figure, but they all knew him and would follow him around and watch him play and ride their bikes to go see his games when he was a kid. So he grew up kind of idolizing Ted Williams. So a lot of his stories were around Ted, but a lot of his stories too, it was so much fun. Between myself, my brothers, my dad, sitting down, when I was growing up and Brett was growing up and my dad was still playing and my grandpa was scouting then, and fighting over the eras and fighting over, back when I played, and we Brett and I used to just needle my grandpa. We only had 8 teams, all this. And I said, well, gosh, man, you didn't let black players into the league till 48, 47. The earth was half as populated. There wasn't a Latin American presence yet. And all you were throwing back then, Gramps, was the straight ball. Bob Feller wasn't throwing nowhere. We get them going. But we had, to have family members. And then, I was fortunate that, my grandpa, he was such a big part of our life. But, he was around till I was 30 years old, so I had 30 years of a grandfather that was very involved in our lives. And, just to have family members in the game as you're going through a major league career and all that goes with that, to have a brother that's in the league with you, a dad who's, managing or in a front office and played as long as he did, and my grandpa, to have family members that can truly relate to what you're going through all the time was a blessing. But our conversations and competitions and love of sports over the years was awesome.
Right, Boonie, you're the only 3-generation all-star family in the history of the sport. So when you got that picture taken, I believe at Comiskey that day with your grandfather, your father, your brother, and you, what was that? What did that mean to you?
Yeah, it meant a lot. My only all-star game, and to be on the National League team and Brett on the American League team. And it was about a year before my grandpa passed away. but he was in really good health at the time. So to have my dad and my grandpa there, I know meant the world to them. And, add in my mom and my grandma, and the, just the extended family that was all there kind of celebrating in that week with us. It's one of the greatest keepsakes that I have, or photos that I have. As you know, I have it up in my office, both at home and in my Yankee Stadium office. But it's definitely a picture that that makes you proud to be, and humbled, like to realize, like, no way that happens.
Right.
And to be able to share in it with the three of them was pretty cool, and something we'll all never forget.
Boonie, I have a question that I've always wanted to ask a major leaguer, and this sounds silly, but I used to do theater in high school, and every once in a while I have this recurring nightmare that all of a sudden it's like the show is tonight. And I'm 30, right? So I haven't been on the stage in high school in half my life. And they say, we're doing the show tonight, Jeff, are you ready? And I don't know any of my lines, right? Because I'm 30 and they just expect me to know it. So these are the kind of nightmares that I have, or I have radio nightmares that I do an entire show and the microphone was off, right? So nobody heard anything I said. As a former major leaguer or a manager, do you ever like wake up in a sweat like, oh my gosh, wait, do you have those nightmares?
Funny you should bring that up. We were just talking about this the other day with Tino Martinez, actually. So Tino Martinez said he goes to stretch and the ball never gets to him and he can't catch the ball coming from an infielder. Mine, that I still have, period, to this day, is I can't run. I can't get down the line. I'm going and I just can't get there. And it's like I'm running in quicksand and I'm panicking because I have this vision of myself as being a good athlete, and I can run, and in my dream I cannot move. I'm so slow, I can't get to first base, and it's I've had that dream dozens of times in my life, and I don't know what it means, but I cannot get to first base.
Yeah, I have a similar one, Boonie, and this is the weirdest one ever. I'm at the free throw line, but instead of shooting a basketball, I'm shooting a winter coat. Because my greatest fear in life is to shoot an air ball from the free throw line. You can't shoot a winter coat. You shoot it, it becomes a parachute, and it opens up, and you always shoot it short of the rim because it's a winter coat. That's what I have at least once a year, and that's been going on for 50 years of my life. So you talk about oddballs, there's nothing stranger than that.
And I know how good a shooter you are.
So Boonie, back to your dad for a second. When you moved to Anaheim with the family, and your dad is the everyday catcher for the Angels, I met your three dorky friends at your 40th birthday party, and they're still three of your best friends in the whole world, and they're three dorks. They told me that. You never told anyone, my dad is the catcher for the Angels. What was the thinking behind that a junior high kid comes in and just keeps concealed who he is?
I don't know. Nothing intentional, or maybe they never asked. I don't know. I don't think you go to school and tell them what your dad does. That's. So I wasn't not telling them. I guess I didn't, and I had a lot of fun moving to Villa Park and going into junior high school. And like you said, met a lot of my friends for life. And I don't know. I was just an athlete. I was just more interested in showing them what was showing up to their school on the basketball court, on the football field, and on the diamond.
Right. Boonie, you told me once you've seen Bob Boone, your dad, well, this was a few years ago, cry twice in his whole life. Can you tell us about those two times?
Yeah, so that number has risen over the last 5-10 years. Now he cries a lot. So, but at the time, there were two times that I remember well. When Darryl Kyle died, obviously it was a shock to the baseball world, and I remember right after hearing it, he called the team together and just addressed the team and kind of broke down and cried, and just like, it's one of those moments that, you get so consumed in how important our job is and the game is today and stuff. And it's just, one of those unfortunate, in this case, reminders of a little dose of reality and perspective. And like, this game tonight ain't everything. That's not what it's all about. And it really, hit us all pretty hard when Daryl passed away, and my dad addressed our team about it. Really broke him up a little bit. And then, he got to tell me I had made the All-Star team in 2003. So he was our manager in Cincinnati, and I got to the field I guess it was that Sunday before when they announced it, and I walked in, and Tim Foley, who's the third base coach, goes, "Hey, go see your dad." And I had no idea what he wanted. I'm like, all right. I was walking in, getting ready to go have some breakfast before our game or whatever. He goes, "Go see your dad first." So I walked into his office, and he's standing there, and then as soon as he started talking, he started crying, and just like, you made the All-Star team, and he was, just kind of bubbling. It was a pretty cool moment, and something I'll never forget.
And then when you became the Yankee manager, he was pretty emotional about that too, correct?
Yeah, he was. So that's at the point, though, where he had started to cry a little bit, more often. So,
grandchildren, all that, right?
Yeah. So I called him, and I tried to kind of, go with the, so I called, he's following the whole time, like, "Hey, have you heard anything, this and that?" So I called him. I'm like, "Hey, the Yankees just called, I'm kind of like that. It's down mood." He goes, "Oh yeah, what they have?" I go, "I got it." and he started crying immediately.
So for you, Boonie, I'm a dad of a 9-month-old now, and my life is completely turned upside down in all the best ways. A whole new channel of my heart has opened up in ways I can't even explain. But, being a dad is so important to you and your relationship with your dad. How did that change you as quickly as it did for me? Now, it's been much longer for you now, of course.
Yeah. I mean, there's nothing like welcoming a child into your family. It's incredible. I am much further along than you are now with 2 in college, and,
right,
and 3rd headed there next year, and another one in high school. So, it's first of all, it's amazing how fast it all goes, and it's amazing just the different stages of life that you go through with your kids. But I'm proud, so proud of all 4 of my kids, and the relationship that I have with each one of them is ultimately what it's all about while we're here.
Well, Boonie, thanks so much for being with us today. Maybe someday, you're going to have your own podcast with your own son, like I have with Jeffrey. Like, seriously, how great is this?
Yeah, this is really cool, and it's great to see both of you guys. I miss you, and I'll see you guys at the ballpark. But keep up the great work, all right?
All right, thanks, Boonie. Say hi to Dan Baker for us, okay?
Thank you, Boonie.
Boonie, thanks for everything.
Well, Aaron Boone, Boonie was so great, so funny on the episode. Thanks again to him for, during the season, taking the time for our dinky little podcast here. Can you give me one more Boonie story? I know you guys spent a lot of time together.
Right. So we did a game in Toronto once, maybe 10 years ago, and I'm the dugout reporter, and I didn't realize that my passport had expired. So I can't get into Canada. I'm late now, and I have to go get a new passport in the morning at 6 o'clock in the morning to get an expedited passport so I could get to the game on time. My boss was furious, Mike McQuaid, at me for not realizing that my passport had expired. So I wait in line. I spend like $400 to get an expedited passport, and I make it to the game on time. I don't miss a thing. But in the first inning, Sean McDonough, our play-by-play guy, says, "Tim, you almost didn't make it to Toronto. Would you please explain what happened?" So I explain what happened about my passport, and Boonie says on the air in the first inning, he goes, "That's not the story that I heard. I heard that there was a height requirement to get into Canada, and Tim didn't meet the height requirement, meaning he was telling me I was too short to go to Canada. That's how the game started, with this discussion in the first inning of a major league game. Only Boonie could say something like that, and only I could laugh at something like that.
Aaron Boone, an amazing guest, and as always, thank you for listening, and thank you for being a part of our family.